Very good afternoon and welcome to Technical Session 2 on Skilling, Upskilling and Reskilling India. In this session, we are honored to have Shri Praveen Kumar ji as chairperson for this session. Mr. Praveen Kumar ji, Secretary, Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, Government of India. Shri Praveen Kumar is an IAS officer from 1987 batch of Tamil Nadu cadre. He is presently working as Secretary, Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. Prior to this, he has handled various important positions in the state government as well as in central government, where he was involved in policy formulation and implementation of various programs. Shri Praveen Kumar has done his BTech and MTech in metallurgy from IIT Kanpur. Apart from this, he holds postgraduate diploma in business administration and public administration, as well as MPhil in social science. In this session, we have another speaker, Professor Raj Nehru. Professor Raj Nehru is the youngest and founding vice chancellor in the country, who left his lucrative corporate career to serve the dream of transforming national skill ecosystem that is on higher priority in the state and country. He has been appointed as the Vice Chancellor of Sri Vishwakarma Skill University of Haryana, the first skill university of India and sixth in the world. He has been also entrusted with an additional responsibility as Mission Director, Haryana Skill Development Mission. He has also been appointed by Governor of Haryana as the Director on the Board of Haryana State Electronics Development Corporation Limited. He has been conferred with many awards, with the most recent one as Most Inspiring Vice Chancellor Award by Golden AIM Conference. The next speaker in this session is Dr. Swati Majumdar. Dr. Swati Majumdar is an international technical and vocational educationist and trainer with 20 plus years of professional experience in education. She has been advising the government at national and international level on policy related matters in higher education, blended education model, and vocational education. She is a policy advisor on skill development and self-financed universities. After years of research, Dr. Swati has developed a unique skill university model, and under her able leadership, Symbiosis has established two skills universities, namely Symbiosis Skills and Professional University Pune, and Symbiosis University of Applied Sciences Indore. Dr. Swati has chaired the Skill Development and Vocational Education Committee of a state government for defining the state TVET policy. She has been advising Government of India's MHRD and a Skills Ministry on policy matters related to skill development in the country. The next speaker in the session, we have Dr. Sandhya Chintala ji. Dr. Sandhya Chintala is the Executive Director and Vice President of NASSCOM. Dr. Chintala has a rich background in international and national education management. Dr. Chintala's contribution towards the development of a workforce market intelligence system, the analysis of talent supply and demand report, the quality assurance parameters for affiliation, accreditation, and certification, documents, and the design and development of high-end online assessments and platforms for qualification packs and related areas have helped modernize and bridge the gap between education provision and vocational training for this industry. I welcome all the esteemed panelists and members for this discussion on skilling, upskilling, and reskilling India. And may I now request Mr. Praveen Kumar ji to chair this session and to address the gathering and bless us. Sir, please.
Good afternoon, Savita. Thanks for this introduction, lavish introduction for all the panelists. I hope you can hear you, everyone.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. So we have a very eminent panel here, and as decided by Pankaj and her team, I'm supposed to start first and then all the other panelists speak, then we have a long question and answer session. So let me start by just saying that we have traveled long since this ministry was formed in 2014 with a new focus of the government to have skilling as one of the one of the important areas to be emphasized, and so that we can capitalize on the demographic dividend which India had and which we continue to have for the next 20 years. A lot of things have been done in the last 6 years, 5 years, 6 years. A large short-term training system, industry-driven ecosystem has been created where the industry is driving the short-term training. Long-term training has also increased, and both industry linkage there also has gone up with the courses being designed with the help of the industry. The apprenticeship has been liberalized, and we have tried to bring in standardization to a new regulator, National Council of Vocational Education and Training. And in the last 5 years, 5.5 crore people have been trained through the Government of India and its machineries. I mean, that's not a small number. But time is the right time to rethink, reimagine where should skilling go. There are a lot of reasons for that. One thing, the world is changing very rapidly. COVID has also accelerated this change, but there is a general disruption. The order of the day, everything new technology comes, the old skills get disrupted, gets wasted. Some sociological change comes. I say COVID as an example. The old thing, the examples are there. That cable TV fellow was very popular 20 years back. Now with the dish TV, the cable TV fellow, the skilling required would have totally gone. He will have to reskill himself into perhaps maintenance of dish antennas, other things. Hospitality has been severely affected due to COVID. Next 2-3 years it may take to pick up. Even the barber, I mean the ancient thing, he lost half of his business of shaving by the invention of safety razor. I mean that was gone. That no one wanted to go to the barber shop to shave. Everyone started to shave. So the sum and substance is skilling learned today may not be relevant tomorrow. So any skilling which we do, which may perhaps give the technical inputs for today, required for today, for next 2-3 years, but it should also equip that person to be able to reskill himself, upskill himself tomorrow when the new thing comes. You can't rest satisfied with a single skill. You have to have a capability to reskill, upskill continuously. There was a lathe machine, the CNC came, then a 5-axis CNC came. New things will keep on coming. If you just keep on, I learned skilling on lathe in ITI, then you won't be able to progress. So we have to orient that skill to meet the changes which is going to occur. And multi-skills is going to be very important. A single skill is okay for a big establishment. A small OYO type hotel will need a person who will do a general duty assistant, then do the housekeeping also, and perhaps drive and bring things for the provisions also. So a kind of multi-skill is required. A geriatric person will need geriatric care, will need a driver, will even need a person who can perhaps cook for him. When that kind of multi-skilling will be required for small establishments. That is other thing which perhaps in future, imagining we have to focus on multi-skilling. Then, of course, we always talk of the new age courses, the cutting edge technologies. That will be important both in short-term training and long-term training. That will be data analytics, virtual reality, drone technology, AI, cloud computing, anything. I mean, those things will be there, and they will keep on changing also. The disruptions are faster in these areas. Things you learn today may not be there. So you may need a lot of short-term skilling for that. Other thing, that the world is very competitive today. I mean, the international trade is driven on small margins. And this small margin will be determined largely by the level of skilling our workers have. Quality labor, the quality of skilling. Generally people say, oh, international America के लिए है तो high quality finishing होना चाहिए, India के लिए low quality finishing. That won't work. You have to have a high quality finishing, highly skilled labor. If you want to survive in the international trade, you want for India to become a market for the international world. Linked to that is market for international labor, skilled labor. I mean, there is a big opportunity there. Our skilling should orient ourselves to the need with the countries which have an aging population. So this leads to the question, should we have two sets of skills? One for the international market, international trade, one for local? That is not possible. That's not possible to have two sets of skills in the country. It has to be uniformly good so that we have a big pool of good skilled labor, some of whom will take the opportunity and go abroad and satisfy the international market. Other thing we almost always forget when we forget when we talk of competition is inclusiveness. Skilling should also be inclusive, whether it be gender or with person with disabilities, because inclusive society is a compassionate society, and that leads to better livelihood levels, better lives, better GDP, better gross happiness. So skilling should also focus on the to be inclusive. Should not be focused only on competition is good, but inclusiveness is also adds to the competition, does not reduce from that. Then the training delivery mechanism also will have to change. On the face to face, we have need to leverage technology in skilling using VR, AR, so that the face to face interaction comes down and we skill a larger population which we can do compared to face to face classroom infrastructure. So we have to invest in skilling infrastructure, as cloud based skilling, and also take care of the last mile, because the last mile are the poorest of the poor who should be able to access this technology based skilling. Then we need soft skills, language skills that has to be incorporated in skilling so that they remain competitive. We need to integrate vocation, formal education, and vocational education. That is very important. National education policy also talks of integration. It has 77 times we have to report to vocational education. That should be brought in. That each child who is studying in school, in college, has a skill or develops also a skill. That should be the aim. And then we need to make it aspirational. That is very important. We need to make the skill aspirational so that today we don't feel hesitant to send our children for skilling courses. Now we feel hesitant. We say we should do BA, we should do MA, we should not go to skilling. So that is the broad layout which I thought I can lay in 5 minutes, which I was indicated by AIU when they sent it. And now I will call upon the panelists. I will start with Professor Dr. Nehru, Raj Nehru, or 10 minutes perhaps. The time starting now, perhaps. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Praveen Kumarji, and thank you AIU and the organization who have organized this event, and my co-panelists. I think Secretary Sir has already brought out some very important issues, so I will try to capture a couple of other things. While one of the major roadblocks to India's growth is going to be its quality, the poor quality of human capital that we see today. And given last few years, the speed of change and the velocity with which the challenges have emerged have added to overall problems. And one of the biggest changes today, what we see is the digital transformation, automation, migration, globalization, competition in a VUCA world, which is volatile, complex, uncertain, and ambiguous environment. And with growing uncertainties of pandemic, which has consequently changed and shortened the life cycles of innovation, ideas, and tools, and technologies, and processes, and procedures of work. And at the same time, which also impacts our nation, because if we do not utilize it well now, the demographic dividend cannot be taken. And the challenges it has resulted into is the predictability and the sustainability of the business, the revenue, the profits, and the livelihood. Secretary Sir has brought out some very important examples. In fact, I was also looking at some examples. Many years back, we used to go to the tailoring shops to go and stitch our clothes. No more, many people don't go to the tailoring shops. So most of them are ready-made garments today available in the store, and millions of self-employed tailors have to reinvent themselves. We no more, many people go to the goldsmith shops, and because most of the gold souks have opened up, where the new scheme, the new programs, and new customer management schemes are coming up. Most of the people are moving to away from personalized cars and drivers and shifting towards Ola and Uber-based transportation system. We used to have restaurants or roadside dhabas where you used to go and get the food from the vendors, but it's slowly shifting towards the online ordering system, either with the Zomatos or Uber Eats. And same is happening with traditional plumbers and electricians and saloons, where most of them are losing their businesses to the personalized services, qualitative services provided by the organizations like Urban Clap. And if you look at the education, even the education and skilling has also slowly started moving towards the digital interventions of like Khan Academies, Byju's, and Udemy, who are replacing slowly the traditional education. In fact, during the pandemic, we have seen many families have withdrawn their children from the private schools and enrolled them into the government schools, because they have simultaneously enrolled them onto a digital platform of a Khan Academy or a Udemy or a Byju's, because they feel that that's even better and that saves their cost. So that kind of change is going to put a lot of pressure on many industries and the people who are working in these industries. They are teachers, or whether they are low-end workers or high-end workers. And we will very soon see the similar challenges coming up in cinemas and theaters, which are slowly going to be replaced by the Netflix or Prime Video or Hotstar, and giving a big competition. And unless there is a reinvention in the way we are going to do these businesses, there's going to be a challenge. So pandemic, technology, innovation, and automation is changing human habits immensely, and the way humans' preferences and tastes and aspirations are immensely impacting the way the work used to be done. So skilling, upskilling, and reskilling becomes altogether most important. One is to learn skills in some area, another is to continue to adapt to new learnings, and the most important thing is sometimes to perform and learn a new job, because you don't know whether that job will stay there or it will disappear in coming days. So both I find the skilling, reskilling, and upskilling very, very critical. But from the upskilling and reskilling context, upskilling is primarily focused on helping the workforce to become more skilled and minimize the talent gaps and stay relevant in the current job position that they are, while as the reskilling is more focused on making workforce to be more ready and available for other jobs, given the situations of career shift or due to the disappearing of certain jobs. So we also have to keep in mind the distribution of the workforce in the country today, because there's a huge divide between the distribution of workforce and the availability of this workforce between the rural, urban, and tribal belts, and then at the same time the access to the quality of education and skilling. So many studies are indicating, when we look at the reports, some are very authentic reports, some are different organizations have come up with these reports. Almost 38% of Indian workforce today is illiterate. Almost 25% of them has education up to primary school level, and the remaining some 36 to 40% are having education level of mid-age, middle and higher education, higher level. So which is a big challenge to us. And on the other side, when we look at the vocational education or the skill education, it's not more than 5 to 7%. And given the changes and challenges of this VUCA world and the kind of automations that we are finding all around the way, the traditional, this situation cannot be handled by a traditional mindset. It requires a new way of thinking. It requires, what we call 21st century problems cannot be solved with 20th century tools. So skilling, reskilling, and upskilling requires altogether a different perspective, the way it needs to be handled. So I feel that when we talk of skilling, there is an element of relevancy in skilling, and I have got to say 4 things when it comes to relevancy. Skilling of relevant and eligible population. Today are not training. In my personal experience, I have seen that people are getting enrolled for the training, but most of the times they are not a relevant, eligible population. The second relevancy issue is the skilling of relevant demand-led programs. We enroll people, but the programs for which they are getting trained are not the relevant programs for which they are supposed to be trained. The third relevancy issue is skilling with relevant quality and infrastructure. This is another issue. While as we enroll for the programs, they are the relevant population, but the kind of infrastructure in terms of the soft infrastructure and the hard infrastructure, we are not providing that quality. And eventually the quality and the value of their qualification that they take over does not satisfy the market requirement. And the last that I want to talk about from the relevancy point of view is skilling with lifelong and life-wide objectives. Today in India, if we see, we have more than 68% of this youth population coming from the rural belts. And unless we penetrate our vocational and skill education in the rural in India and make our reach to the rural and the tribal India, where this young population lives, provide them with the quality trainers, quality assessors, quality infrastructure, and a stringent monitoring system. Because today, one of the biggest challenges is the ethical practices, the integrity issues. So unless a stringent monitoring system is not brought into, and unless we remove the inadequacies in the existing training programs, align them with the market requirements, accessibility is a big challenge. Most of the training institutions are located in the nearest small towns, and they're inaccessible to most, including women, because Secretary Sir talked about the inclusivity. Most of the women are today not able to go for the skilling because of the lack of inaccessibility and due to lack of the public transport facilities. So the government ITIs, wherever they are, they have got severely limited capacities, and they are offering outdated courses. So that's another challenge. And another challenge is high dropout rates. And I have personally found this dropout rate, one of the reasons is because skilling is not aspirational. There is no mobility to a short-term skilling program that one does today. And because of that lack of mobility, there is a roadblock for many people, mental roadblock, emotional roadblock, social roadblock, and they do not pursue it, and they slowly start dropping out. Good thing what I found in the recent happening is the new education policy, which has talked about integrating this vocational education at different levels. One is at the school level and at the higher education level in a phased manner. Though it's going to take time, but this is one of the areas that we need to focus on. Unless we integrate this education, skill education at the school level, we will not be able to achieve the purpose and the mission of the skill education in the country. So the schools are the biggest target areas for us, where we have to make sure that the capacities and infrastructure and the relevant programs are brought inside the school, so that at that age and at that level, the skill education is brought up. The second thing is higher education. It needs to, higher education and higher education institutions need to revisit and test the qualification value that they are providing to the youngsters in light of the emerging challenges and the requirements of the market. And they need to redefine the purpose and the vision and the mission of the higher education institutions today. Today, more than 65% of institutions have less than 500 students. Most of the reports we have, in fact, there was an AIU report that I also found where some of the reports indicate that only 4% of the educational institutions in India have less than around 3,000 students, which means huge capacities are today available in higher educational institutions. Not only this, you will find that today, if you look at the GR at different levels, especially at the higher education level, the GR is almost 27%, which means millions of youths are today not going to the higher education. Which means if we look by the data that the AI also provided, 140 million youths are today in the age group of 18 to 23, out of which only 37 million are enrolled today in higher education, which means 103 million youngsters are not enrolled in education. But from the report, it says that if the eligible youths, we say, who have already done 12th and are eligible for higher education, more than 47 million youths are there, but they don't have options to move into the higher education. They have entered into the labor market and they will continue to be exploited there. They will never get an opportunity to get upskilled or reskilled. So that is the target population where we have to see how they can be roped in. And I think one beautiful tool, which we have also found in the university through our research, recognition of prior learning is going to be a game-changing thing. I think most most of the developed nations have actually used recognition of prior learning right from the bottom level to the higher education level. So if that area is explored, I think it can be a game-changing thing for the country, especially from the upskilling and reskilling perspective. The last bit I would want to add is the automation of the bringing in the new age skills. So so the automation is, and the new age technologies like artificial intelligence or cloud computing or blockchain, these are going to be the new emerging areas where majority of jobs are going to come up. While we will see millions of jobs going away, we will see millions of jobs coming in, but they will be in the form of new technologies. So the new technology interventions are required. As business models change and technology gains more prominence, workforce who is equipped with the most necessary skill sets of new technologies, both hard and soft, can steer the success of the organization. They will get the opportunity of entry into the workforce. So I think with that, one important thing at the end is the government and the regulatory mechanism has to use a carrot and stick approach. For example, today apprenticeship, we see this is very poor penetration of apprenticeship, and this is the most important critical driver of skilling and reskilling and upskilling. But we are not able to make much headway into this. So somewhere we have to use a carrot and stick approach for this. Digitization of vocational learning has to help us to move forward. Upskilling of teachers and trainers have to help us. So with that, I stop myself here, and thank you very much once again for giving me this opportunity. Back to you, sir.
Thanks a lot, Professor. I was just about to say that आपके time ज़्यादा हो गया, but you stopped at the right time. Thanks a lot. Now we move to the second panelist, Dr. Swati Majumdar, the Pro-Chancellor, Symbiosis Skills and Professional Institute, Pune. Dr. Swati, you can unmute yourself and switch your camera on and join.
Okay, first of all, I would like to check if I'm audible.
You're audible, totally audible.
Okay. So thank you to the office bearers and the esteemed members of AIU and Honorable Secretary, sir, for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts. I have emailed a presentation. I'm not sure if AIU can, is it possible for you to put it up on the screen?
I think if the presentation is not long, then it's okay, or else you can try to summarize the presentation, you think, in 10 minutes or something. Okay.
Yes.
If you want to share presentation from your end, you can do that.
I had actually got it sent to Virendra ji, so he said he's been able to do it. Is it possible to check? Hello?
Just a second, I will speak. By the time you have tried. By the time it is coming, you can speak.
Pankaj, what we can do, I think perhaps while you set up this presentation, perhaps we can ask the third panelist, Dr. Sandhya Chintala, to speak. And then okay. that time, Dr. Swati's presentation also.
That would be good.
So that
you can come next.
And also, Dr. Swati will be able to focus on the presentation instead of speaking and filling up time. Okay, Dr. Sandhya, please.
Thank you so much, sir. Yeah, if can you permit sharing of content, please?
Yeah, please. You have been permitted sharing of content. Please go ahead.
It's disappeared again. So if you could once more enable it. Once more enable it, please.
Dr. Suresh Shukla, to permit share content.
Yeah, content share. Yes, it's now permitted. Just give me. And, our own history secretary, G. Shared span and why and from together. This is one industry body that
Dr. Sandhya, I think the bandwidth at your end may be poor. Switch off your video. You can switch off your video and then speak because your voice is drilling kind of thing. Switch off your video.
Okay. Now, I'll just, it then becomes quite a hold on, sir. Let me just try it. Can you hear me at all? Not?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead. It's coming.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much, Secretary Sir, for the starting of this whole program and co-panelists and members of AIU. So this is one industry body. Let me bring in the industry perspective. If others who are not speaking could return, go on mute, it'll be grateful. Thank you. Yeah, so this is one industry body, the ITITS, that basically is coming into being where we walk the talk. What we have done basically is to set up into a scenario where we are actually pushing ourselves into building digital India fast forward. The various forces that have changed, especially the COVID of now, has created a new normal, and this industry body has almost had 85 to 90% of its workforce.
Sandhya, 1 minute. I'll request everyone to mute their mic. Mr. Verma, I think your mic is on, HR Verma.
This is mute, sir.
And others also, let me check.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now it's clear. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, sir. So as I've seen, this ITITS industry is a force in this country towards creating digital India, but also our inert and our requirement and mission and vision is that we have to build the talent hub for the globe. The COVID impact has actually hit the fast forward button, and the new normal that we see, this industry has actually ridden the wave, where today almost 90% of our industry works from home, uses technology extraordinarily well, and has continued to grow even during the pandemic. So before I move forward, let's give you a bird's eye view of our observation of why we need to actually make this change and how upskilling, reskilling will have to be just not an industry initiative, but a collective wisdom and effort of the country at large. So when I move on to the next, it is very amazing to look that 7 billion people in the world, 1.7 billion are in services, 400 million are in our entrepreneurs, 800 million people work as industrial jobs. And then if I look, 1.4 billion out of the 7 billion are in agriculture. 1.9 are too young to work. 430 million are unemployed, and 577 million are over 64 years. But what you see on the other side, the left, is that the higher the educational qualification, the ability for gainful employment seems to be depleting. So this is a critical scenario which is just not in India, but the world over. So forces that are actually creating a disruptive ecosystem which needs us to embrace the change that we want to recommend. One of the biggest ones is the power of disruptive technologies, and that's what I'm going to focus on. And these disruptive technologies are in the area of big data, cloud computing, IoT, robotic process automation, virtual augmented reality, 3D printing, blockchain, and the list goes on. Of course, it is there. What we have identified that 40% of all businesses across all industry sectors will die in the next 10 years if they're not going to be able to embrace technology the way we have to do. Our own industry, if I look at it, there's going to be a workforce mix. So it's very important to understand what this digitization, automation, and these new emerging technologies is going to do. 54% of it will have minor changes, but will continue as normal till at least 2030. 37% will have to embrace technology, and there will be a different view on how people have to work. 9% will be in areas that has not been experienced before or not even imagined. But 600 million of 9% in the workforce in India is 54 million. So you will find that these technologies are not in isolation. They integrate with each other and will impact every other sector that is there. A deeper research has showed us that the sector-wise opportunities in India will actually have these cross-cutting functionalities of these new technologies, whether it's retail, banking, agriculture, healthcare, transportation, manufacturing, telecommunication, or automotive. Further, it is seen that if this technology plays its role well, and we move from agriculture to precision agriculture, from manufacturing, retail, construction, transportation, it will clearly give directly in the next, by 2030, 156 million jobs, which we need to actually enable through a demand-supply, skilling, upskilling ecosystem process. So how are we going to achieve this? And what are these skills that we're looking at? Not only this industry says, which will be the harbinger of change, that not only technical skills like I've articulated before, but professional skills like problem solving, design thinking, continuous learning, communication, product and project management, digitization, collaboration, negotiations have become as important and critical. And our industry folks are actually initiating a process of upskilling their own ecosystem with this process. So what has the industry done over the last 3 years? So we anticipated this emerging tech over a few years. So right about in about 2017 onwards, we started our journey, and we found that 83% of our industry members, which constitute about 92% of the IT/ITS industry in this country, and about 96% of the human resource and also the contribution in revenue, 83% are actually automating work. 79% are retraining existing employees. Then 78% of them out of 100 agree new permanent staff with skills and new technologies. So the academic community has to take this, that the new areas will be the highest paid, most sought after. And existing employees to pick up skills, we are urging them to do so, or they will have to go on. Towards this end, the industry is contributing 10,000 crores, investing in this sort of training every year. The other point that I would like to face before I go into a solutioning process is the nature of work. So we live, learn, and work. We have had a beautiful view of it. If I consider the COVID as an opportunity, that the gig economy is the way to go. If India is upskilled and it becomes the talent hub, we can basically work for the rest of the world as using our skills and competency certificates as a currency for global mobility. So the gig or the sharing economy, sometimes they call it the platform economy, does not really look for long-time employment in one industry. You will be able to work some part of your work for a project in cloud computing in Vietnam, another part in the US, then even in the home ground, you might run your own entrepreneurial effort. So most of the work that will effort will be project-based, it will be based on your competency, and therefore keeping your skills relevant, upskilling yourselves, getting yourselves relevant to just not an industry like IT/ITS, but the application, which is a cross-functional one, will become critically important. So for towards this end, we are looking to upskill our professionals. Over the last 2 years, we have done almost about 50 to 55% of our own employees, 4 million and 20 million indirect, have been skilled and upskilled. We have now looking at the traditional student who is actually university, formal and non-formal, can be skilled and have an idea. So we recommend that the whole education be treated as an industry where the new type of jobs are coaches, designers, learning camps, simulators, e-labs, etc. So towards this end, we recommend that global education coalition should be considered. It is not going to be relevant for us to be isolated because the world of work is global, opportunities are global. Therefore, our educational profile and competency should also change. So we are looking at universities to also become virtual edtech companies. At their own university campuses, like Dr. Nehru also has, they have an educational program plus an entrepreneurial mix, wherein which a hub and spoke model emerges, where entrepreneurial COE, startup, research, cloud and physical enable. So there, an individual who graduates in a program has an opportunity to try out the applications of the learnings that he has had, launch some entrepreneurial processes or a startup, and there is a sharing of credits as well as the IP between the organization, which is the university concerned, the faculty as well as the candidate. These models are espoused very strongly internationally. And even China is using the university structure to actually move its arms and legs into and tentacles into the entrepreneurial effort. For this, every university must not consider itself just as a face-to-face learning, but must have at least three models. One, it must also purport very clearly a live online ILT transformation as well as a VILT, which is a virtual instructor-led program. There must be customized e-learning aggregator marketplaces that they must either participate in or they must contribute towards. So market research, startups in this situation, need analysis and platform players, all this will move into the new format of a university structure which straddles between both industry, academia, on demand and supply. We think state government sponsorship is very critical, if followed by a central government enablement, because they would need a lot of venture cap to create more IP. The idea is to have job creators on par, and the educational institutions take this on as a mission statement and just not to enable job seekers. So I just give you a brief here as a factory of the future. It uses all of these connectivities. So whole manufacturing is digitized. The whole pharmaceutical industry looks at IoT, big data, automation. Here you will find the return on investment is very high, and therefore you will find that the efficiencies are much more. And as an end user, you will always go for quality at the end of the day. We look at the healthcare system where you have genomics, which is customized, AI scientists, RPA. Whoever thought that the healthcare system will write this? But if you go to a hospital, everybody looks very eagerly towards these because the recovery period is 10x faster, as well as the hospital utilization and bed turnaround is again 20x faster. So if I move agriculture, which is one of the largest in the global scenario as well as in India, they're moving towards genetic modified food, and now they're moving towards machinery. They're also moving towards connected weather stations, Doppler effect scenarios, plant sensors, what we call is precision agriculture, precision watering, and then fertilizers, and looking at the genomics of the plants using drones, etc. So DNA warehousing, genetic modification, robot dispatchers, big data analysts to expertise and offer their research. So a scientist or an engineer will find himself very easily entrenched in the agricultural space. So towards this end, we looked at working with MHRD. Of course, MSD is our mentor, but working with MHRD, UGC, AICT. And AICT says for all its 1,000-odd colleges, and it's about 8.4 million workforce, they will also, and 20,000 other institutions under their care, they will actually look for having a aggregator model. So just like SWAYAM is there, we too, with the Ministry of IT and the blessings of MSDE, under the leadership of our present secretary, have actually launched what is called the aggregator model. 2.5 years in 2018, under the Prime Minister, we launched it for a B2B, for our own industry members, so that they may be upskilled, reskilled, and ready to actually be job creators for the supply side. So having done that platform recently in about in November this year, both MSDE and as well as the Mighty actually ready takers from various industry sector councils. Having said this, we said rather than we brought this online platform is free for everybody. So we are walking the talk and say get yourself upskilled and then reskilled or just skilled at different competencies, whether you're an employed individual, unemployed, or you're a fresh learner, you're an intern or an apprentice, this is the place to go. It offers you an enablement of learning all the placement preparation required for you to be a job seeker, professional development for faculty, internship processes, and the list goes on. So we are looking, along with AICT and with MSD and other creators in the ecosystem for education, to look at business skills, then to look at artificial intelligence, big data, cloud, web, mobile. All these are free courses. Please, it is great if the universe, AIU, would make it enablement for all the universities under the care, because once it's available and people get an awareness of it, they understand the application, then they actually nurture startups. Even government employees, faculties, bureaucrats, everyone who gets to learn about and knows how to understand the applications of this and nurture startups and venture caps in this region. So there's a list of all these programs, and the best of it is our member companies who actually have this as paid propositions are offering it free for the country, and the list will continue and the way will grow. So, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for this opportunity. The COVID has created a huge pandemic and a problem, but you have to look at it as a glass half full or it's a glass half empty. Towards this, and thank you so much for this opportunity. Let's work together to build it for the future and for the tomorrow, long times to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Sandhya, for this very clear. You can show your presentation, yeah, for this very clear presentation, also for the small pitch skills you made. Now, I suppose Dr. Pankaj, this Dr. Swati's presentation can be now loaded.
Hello.
Yeah, Pankaj, unmute yourself.
Can you upload the presentation for Dr. Swati?
Yes, ma'am, I have also kept it ready.
So Swati, you can upload yourself. Dr. Swati, I think we can enable Dr. Swati to share it, so she can share it herself.
Then let Swati share it. That will be better.
Yeah, can you see my presentation now, sir?
Not yet. I think it's not yet shared now so far.
Okay.
Dr. Shukla, can you give her the rights to share the presentation?
She has the right. Actually, we gave her right. Somehow she unmuted.
Oh, it is coming. It is coming. It's
Hello?
coming.
It's coming.
It's coming. It's on the way.
Yeah.
Are we able to see the screen now?
Not yet. I think the sharing process is going on. I think the presentation has not yet come. It's black yet.
Is it?
If you advise, we can present it from here, ma'am.
Sure, sir, as you wish.
I think there's a problem in the presentation. from there.
Blessy, can you present it?
Yes, sir. Hello.
Yeah, it's coming.
I'm just sharing.
Are you able to share it?
It's coming. It's coming.
Will you also help to move the slides, or can I do
Yes,
that?
sure, I will do that.
Okay. So while the presentation is coming on, once again, thanks to AIU for giving me an opportunity. I have a very, very short presentation, so shouldn't take more than 7-8 minutes. In the area of, just as an introduction, I would like to say that in the area of skilling, it is very important to identify the new post-pandemic requirements and mapping these new requirements to new skill courses. The second point under skilling I wish to mention is that we need to focus on the new age and future skills, which mainly surround and IT. In the area of upskilling, mainly we need to look at existing employees whose nature of jobs is changing. And we also need to look at students who have graduated but are jobless. In the area of reskilling, we need to look at those who have lost their jobs during pandemic. So my presentation revolves around this. As you are all aware, and I think, can we just go back to the previous slide? These are some of the future skills, and more than 50 to 60% jobs are in this area. My predecessors have already covered it, so I won't take much of your time. Big data, analytics, IoT, robotics, artificial intelligence, cloud and cloud security, AR, VR are all the new upcoming areas. And recently we did a survey with a big financial institution called JP Morgan. And it was seen that majority of the jobs that are likely to come in few years are around these future skills. So in the Symbiosis Skills and Professional University in Pune, we have started the skilling of 1,000 students. The batch just started a week back in all the future skills area, and the entire course All these courses are being funded by JP Morgan. It's a huge CSR initiative from JP. So I think such initiatives will really help students to get trained on future skills. Next slide, please. Some of the important qualification and skills of the future again revolve around automation and information technology. There must be knowledge about ICT. There must be ability in the youth to work with data. The technical know-how is almost a must-have skill, and also other personal skills, including decision-making, communication skills, mindset to change, adaptability. All these are again new age competencies which are required in students. So the industry is demanding that they are not optional, but as a mandatory part of each skill course that is being administered. We must have components where we can train students on basic technology skills, basic data analysis skills, a general technical know-how about uh, manufacturing activities, the different processes that are in place, some basic mechatronics skills, and lastly, as is shown on the screen, the personal skills, which are, like I said, a must-have. Next slide. What are some of the challenges that the companies are facing? Again, we did a survey recently in the industry surrounding Pune, and these are some of the issues and challenges which came to the light. And there's no rocket science about this. I'm sure a lot of you are already aware. In the area of upskilling, the companies are more so than ever before are required to upskill their workforce. For an example, in an assembly line worker who's involved in manually fitting a part will now be required to operate a robot, or other tools of robotics will be required to be having a knowledge about in the uh, workers who are working in the assembly line. So a lot of the companies, automation and auto companies in and around Pune put forth this as one of the major requirements for upskilling. So again, upskilling of existing workforce is absolutely necessary. The second area is reskilling. As you are all aware that technology is expected to change so quickly, and a lot of the jobs are getting displaced. A lot of the jobs are being lost. At the same time, new type of jobs are emerging. Many job roles, as you may be aware, are coming fresh in the market. One example that can give you is recently we started a course as a pilot project with the Automotive Sector Skill Council for electric vehicles, where new job roles are being envisaged in electric vehicle maintenance and servicing, which were not existing before. So as a pilot, we started a World Bank funded skilling project where students are going to be trained on various aspects of repairing and servicing electric vehicles. So this is a tripartite arrangement between electric vehicle manufacturing companies, Symbiosis, and the students at large. So reskilling to tune students and employees for new type of requirements again is an emerging trend that we are seeing. The third area is the ability to continuously learn, or what you called as lifelong learning. And within this area, as you're all aware, that technologies are changing so fast, some are becoming obsolete literally by the day. So continuous professional development is absolutely required for every employee who is working. And there, I think online medium of delivery will play a big role, where certain courses can be offered as part of lifelong learning to continuously upskill and reskill the current workforce and even students who may not be able to get a job quickly. The last but very important is the mindset change. As you are aware that for the success of any program, students and parents especially, there has to be a mindset change. There has to be a mindset change even in the employees to ensure that there is a smooth transition to the new technologies that are emerging, the new ways of doing a job, because there is a certain complacency that has been set in among existing employees. So change is inevitable, and the mindset to accept that change has also to come. Next slide. The current scenario I need not repeat because a lot of my predecessors have already repeated. We had gone to Korea through a delegation of FICCI, and we asked the Korean Ministry of Labor as to how come more than 98% of their workforce is vocationally trained. And you'll be surprised to know that the reason for this success in vocational training, the high rate of success, is mainly the close linkages between their industry and academia. In India, we find that industry are rarely willing to go to universities and colleges for their training needs. But I think that needs to change, and especially with the new education policy and some of the initiatives that the government is taking, and even webinars and seminars like the one organized by AIU will bring industry and academia closer and help train more people on vocational skills. In India, less than 20% of our graduates find jobs. And in fact, post-pandemic, you must have seen that so many educated youth do not have jobs yet. At the same time, a recent survey conducted by us in the local municipal area has seen that many of the people who have lost jobs have literally even put up thelas of pavada. So we got together with the local commissioner and we decided to launch some courses even in logistics and supply chain. As you are aware that the COVID vaccine is now being distributed. So even in such emerging healthcare areas, there is a huge need of logistics and cold chain workforce, people who can operate the cold chain. So in these areas as well, we can offer training. Colleges can offer training in short-term skill-based courses. And many people who have lost their jobs during the pandemic can, instead of putting up pavada thelas, they can actually take up these different skills and earn good livelihoods. So again, these new emerging job roles are coming and we must seize the opportunity. Next slide, please. Some of the issues with the present skill development sector, and I really urge AIU to take these up. A lot of them are being addressed in the new education policy, but we are not yet seeing them being executed. One of the major challenges that as a skill university that we are facing is equivalency. So there is a lack of vertical mobility amongst the vocational courses. Most of the courses are terminal in nature. And although there is an integration of vocational education in the mainstream as per the new education policy, but that has actually not been implemented yet. I'm sure in the next coming months and few years it will be. But until then, these are some startling issues that we are facing. There is no clear policy for recognition of prior learning, especially for students from the informal sector. The eligibility norms are not yet formulated for vocational students. One quick example which I can give you is in Maharashtra, we are running vocational colleges which have implemented the minimum competency vocational scheme of the government of India, which was started in 1988. These students higher secondary certificate, that is a 12th standard board certificate in vocational stream. They have excellent skills, but they do not get opportunity to appear for entrance of engineering. They do not get admission even to courses like BSc agriculture, engineering courses, even BSc electronics or BSc, because the equivalency is lacking. When Modi ji was the chief minister of Gujarat, he had floated a notification whereby even ITI students were given equivalency of 12th standard, which opened the doors for many vocational students to pursue mainstream education. That is majorly still lacking in many states across our country. The second is the teacher training and qualification. Just like teachers who are required to be B.Ed for teaching in schools, we have observed that vocational teachers, there is no such mandate. And teachers do not understand the skill and vocational pedagogy, because of which the quality of vocational education is really suffering in our country. So there is a need for UGC and regulatory bodies to bring about a sea change in this area of teacher training and capacity building, and train our teachers on the formal pedagogy of vocational and skill-based courses, how to deliver those effectively, what is learning outcome, how to evaluate outcomes and skills that students have acquired. These are skills which our teachers are lacking, and we need to do something about them. We of course know about the poor industry linkages, and in the higher education sector, most of the universities are, in fact, all the universities are expected to comply by the list 22 of UGC. So I urge the UGC also to bring about sector specific degree programs. Why can't we have PhD in plumbing? Why can't we have PhD in automobile sector rather than just mechanical engineering? So these sector specific degrees will really go a long way in improving the acceptability of skill based education, and it will encourage a lot of students to go for vocational education, because still in our society degrees have a lot of importance. Next slide please. This is just few of my thoughts on reimagining the skill development or the VET sector. What are some of the characteristics? The curriculum again has to be up to date with the industry requirements. The practical training component has to be very, very focused, emphasized. In our university, we have an extra component of skill classes. So as you are aware, AICT mandates practicals, tutorials and theory for every subject. But along with that, we have also introduced skill classes, where we give 1:1 credit. So for every hour of skill class a student experiences, he gets 1 credit. So this way the skill-based training is emphasized, and it is not just left to the talking part that we are doing skill training. We must actually implement it in our credit policy and in our delivery of education. Infrastructure, again, we need to have specialized machinery for skill training. We need to have close industry linkages to train our students. Standards and qualifications, again, the NSQF and the NOSES are very limited. We need to map the NVQF or the National Vocational Qualification Framework very closely to our different levels of degrees and diplomas, so that a student who passes 10th standard and say he pursues a vocational course at level 5 or level 6 of NQF, he get a equivalence of 12th standard, so that after that he can pursue either a vocational BVoc degree or he can even enter the mainstream of education. So such standards and qualifications need to be closely mapped to the mainstream degrees. The quality of trainers, as I've already mentioned, so I won't repeat that, but we need to come out with qualification for our teachers so that they undergo specialized training like the B.Ed program for knowing how to deliver a skill-based course and really increase the efficacy of the delivery of skill-based education. A positive image, again, as you are all aware, that skill-based education is not very socially acceptable and doesn't hold the kind of high respect that our degrees do. But at the same time, with the new education policy, and if we come out with sector-specific degrees and not limit ourselves only to BVoc, I think it will go a long way in building a positive image of vocational education and skilling courses. Next slide. I won't go into this, but I'll just request you to move to the next slide, please. These are just a picture of the Symbiosis Skill University model, and where we have all these enablers and facilitators, which will help the skill model to really succeed. In our model, we also offer yearly internships so that the internships can result into placements by the end they graduate. So if it's a 3-year program, they go for internships of 2 months in the first year, 2 months in the second year, and in the third year, go for 6 months internship. Thereby, every student who completes this program from our university, he gets almost 8 months to 1 year work ex by the time he graduates. So his internship automatically leads to placements. So I request that such innovative models be encouraged in our system. I won't go to the other slides. I will request AIU to stop the presentation at this stage. And once again, thank you for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Swati. And now we throw the floor open, rather throw the screen open for people to ask questions. Pankaj, how will you, they should pose their questions through the chat, or how do you propose? Because everyone's speaking at the same time, lead to noise only. Let someone propose
Actually,
who.
both options are available. I mean, if somebody wants to send through chat, it is possible.
What I will suggest that anyone wanting to ask a question may say so in the chat platform, then they will be asked to say the question.
With the permission of the chair and Secretary General, can I request all the people to unmute their camera and come on screen and raise hands, ask questions?
Professor Thiru Basakam.
It is a question to the Honorable Chairman of the session, Sir, the Secretary Praveen Kumar, and of course to other panelists as well. How are you, Secretary Sir? Praveen Kumar Sir.
Fine, sir. Shoot the question.
I am Thiruvasagam, Vice Chancellor of Ahmed University. Yeah. You remember me as well.
Yeah.
It's okay. Thank you, sir. Now, after hearing all of you, my confidence level has gone up. Yes. Basically, all the people spoken about possibility of enhancing the skill of the students. Of course, we are from higher education. There is no specific program in higher education institutions to impart as a skill-oriented program right now. All comes under the value addition. As you know pretty well, that any program comes under value addition without compulsion, students will not take it very seriously, number one. Number two, for an example, we have introduced a program called VWOC, one of the panelists mentioned, as suggested by AICTE. The students opting for this course is very less. Obviously, there are two reasons. Number one, the nomenclature itself, it's not up to the mark. Students have their own fear. If they go out of the university, the degree of BO, the possibility of getting employment is minimum. And moreover, the recognition of nomenclature by the bodies like UPSC, State Public Service Commission, and other government body not yet given any acceptance for it. Number two, though we name it as a training-oriented program, we introduce in the syllabus, but we don't have the people to train them as well. Number three, after listening you, I am going to place a request with the AU Secretary General, who is always proactive and positive. This is the time we have to mobilize the ideas and get the support from ministry and from organizations like Future Skill. We have to work together by forming a committee, giving a recommendation to University Grants Commission and the AICTE, how we can introduce programs of this nature compulsorily with the accepted nomenclature and attracting more students. This is number one. Hopefully AAU will do it, because AAU is the only forum, has the wide contact with all the universities of 1,008 in number. If you do like that, certainly it will be a very big help to the younger generation of this country. Number two, to the question to our Honorable Secretary. Sir, you have a lot of funding, you have a lot of projects that you are giving to people coming with the proposals. Now, I would like to place a request for you. When we admit students in PWOC or skill-oriented program, why not your ministry think about giving some internship, financial internship, or you can take them as apprenticeship. That kind of encouragement will attract more students. And you know pretty well, the people coming for this PWOC and others are totally economically backward, and most of them come from depressed and oppressed background only. So unless you support financially, they will not come forward. That is the request number one. Number two, lot of research also to be done in the area of skilling, upskilling, and reskilling as well. Do you have any funding to do can be extended to universities to come out with good recommendations? These are all things I wanted to share. Kindly.
Just let me respond. The first thing you said that whether graduate student, undergraduate student can be compulsory asked to do vocational training also. Already UGC has brought that embedded apprenticeship program, degree program, under which some of the credits during your degree program you can earn through apprenticeship. Now, one step further, we have started a dialogue with UGC that instead of universities themselves developing training centers, vocational training centers, why don't you have a system that based on the skill regulator approved programs which someone does, those credits can be allowed to be integrated with the credits which comes on the core courses. For the optional courses, you can take any of the skill development programs, maybe an ITI, maybe apprenticeship, maybe short-term training programs, future skills program, anything can be taken. Those credits together with the credits which he gets in the core courses in the university, together they can make give him a degree plus a certificate for skilling also, so that he gets two degrees or certificates. And if he doesn't want to pursue higher education, they can have some skill, a certified skill on which he can take a job. So that work is going past. But you said well that AIU can popularize this among the universities, because even this embedded degree apprenticeship program, first finally UGC can only give an enabling structure. Finally, the universities system, the academic council and the governing body will have to approve those system of accepting credits from outside the institutions. Everything need not be embedded in the institution, university itself. It can be taken from other institutions which are regulated by the skills system. Regarding BVOC, it's a good point which I have made, that Bachelor of Vocations, we have already taken up with the AICT chairman that wherever bachelor is a requirement, BVOC should be included, and he has positively, rather he only suggested that we will take it up if you're right. Similarly, if wherever diploma is a essential qualification, BVOC should be allowed, and wherever skill training, any 12th is allowed, then ITI should be allowed as a equivalent certification. And you have a wrong impression that we have a lot of funds which we give when people approach us. We don't have much funds. We have some 2-3 schemes under which the funds goes, which are like Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, where people are trained based on a system of training partners, very, very similar to university system. Of parallel scaling system is there, and Sandhya's IT and ITS Council also is part of the system where it acts as an awarding body. And then we have for ITA also, we don't have any funding in the states to fund the ITIs. So there's a very limited funding available, and any funding which goes has to be. But any research proposals, it is done more based on what we think a research area is there. Then we give an ad based on that. People respond and apply, whether it be a study or research or consultancies, depends on that. Our new regulator has been tasked with taking up research studies. It is under the process of formation. It is just started, and then it will be starting doing this research activities. There will be floating more proposals for universities to take part in the research and other things. So this is a broad spectrum of the way higher education can be embedded into the scaling system. This is a broad spectrum into which we are working with UGC. Perhaps AIU, once the UGC brings out the enabling regulation, after that the universities have to accept it. The university, so AIU can do advocacy with the universities to accept this enabling a regulation, which is done so that people can take the optional courses in form of skill courses. That is the idea. Credit framework, we are trying to tweak the credit framework which was prepared as Samanvay was prepared in 2014. We are trying to make it more structural, so that will be out also in another 2-3 months. Where you can know what hours of credit can be transferred. That work is going on. And
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Can I ask a question, sir?
Yeah,
so my parent office has been UGC, and when this apprenticeship embedded program was being discussed in UGC, the first question which came up was that if this program is introduced by the universities, who will provide so many apprenticeship opportunities? Is the Ministry of Skill Development or NASCOM or any other agency
So,
ready to provide so many apprenticeship opportunities so that every university can start with such a program?
no, it's like this.
Similarly,
This- Yeah, please.
Similarly, because the national policy on education talks about internships, that every student should be going for internship, whether it is a Hindi, English, history, political, any subject, they should be going for internships. So there's a need for an internship bank where the internships are available so that the students can go there. So AIU on our part, we spoke to ICAI and they are ready to give us something like 8 to 10 lakh internships in the field of say commerce, accountancy, management like this. But like this, we need to partner with some organizations who can provide us an internship bank so that the students can do internships there. And many of those internships can be in the skill related disciplines so that the students become employable when we talk of so much of unemployability of our graduates. So for increasing the employability, we do need skill oriented internships. But where to get them and where to have a consolidated list or sort of a portal for these internships and apprenticeship, that is an issue.
Dr. Mittal, I think no central body will be able to provide such a bank. It has to be university driven. The university has to access first those that are in the catchment zone of the university, the industries which are there. MSMEs are there. MSMEs are not coming. They may come for internship. They may not come for apprenticeship because under apprenticeship you have to give a stipend. Under internship is free. So it has to be driven by the university themselves because we have almost 30,000 universities and
1,000 universities.
1,000
and all, and no central, whether MSD or anyone can be giving a central bank. It has to be driven, university driven, and it has. And now forget about general universities. Even for engineering, already there is a concept of internship in the last summer, and while the more advanced engineering colleges like ITIs and NITs try to arrange for the summer training for their students. Other engineering colleges, what they do, I mean, you must knowing, they leave it to the students to access that, which shouldn't be there. It should be, I think the university should take the responsibility of tying up with the neighboring institutions which are there in the catchment area and provide for that, so that the this localized kind of thing will only be successful. A centralized won't be successful as far as this is concerned. A bank of internships may not be possible. It may be more of a locally thing. Yeah. I think you had already spoken, Professor Nehru. Let others ask the question first.
So, sir, I have to, because we heard this BVOC related point coming from the Thirusagam Sahab. The point is that like diploma, ITI and BTECs, they are notified for apprenticeship. BVOC and MVOC is yet to be notified for apprenticeship on the portal. And because of this, many organizations do not consider BVOC and MVOC students to be enrolled for apprenticeship. So I think this is an important thing I wanted to bring to your notice.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, Dr. Gupta, Neeraj Gupta.
Thank you, sir. I just like to share that one small example, sir, what Secretary sir said, that we have to work out this at the local level. We started the Bachelor of Vocation program in 2014 with probably the first program. Now, this is designed in a manner that after 6 months of semester, 2 months is compulsory internship in all semesters. That means the internship has to start early. Our experience has been that if the internship starts upfront in the first year, then the students are actually trained to be for the industry. And many of them actually take an exit option after 1 year taking a diploma because where they have done the internship, they do it there. So that was one thing. And I remember discussing, and Symbiosis Skills Professional University has done that, I think, fairly well in their architecture program, the professional program, where the internship is not an add-on at the last semester, but it is embedded all through the courses. So one of the biggest challenges that we have personally experienced is that we try to take skill as a garnishing on the top or as independent thing, while the whole thing has to be embedded all through within the program design, and that is very much within the limits of the university. And sir, I'll beg to differ. It is not only university level. In the university system, it has to be narrowed down to the department or the school level. Unless the school takes up that initiative, nothing will, because then what happens is there is one centralized portion, everybody will push it there. So it is like a plate of salad lying somewhere there else. It has to be the whole gravy of the curriculum. That is what. So that is what we like to submit, and I think to large extent we have been very, very successful in a very localized level. And I can say that because of that scaling, my BPOC students of interior design, they are getting better packages than a 5-year BR program from a traditional university system. I can share those details with you. Initially, we had a very tough time trying to place the students, but then it worked beautifully because they said, okay, look, and only difference is that we allowed them to do internship in whatever was their interest area. So they could work in a carpenter shop, or they could work in a design office, or they could go to a manufacturing of Godrej interior. So that flexibility, unless the university provides them and we accommodate them. This internship is a 12 credit program. So after the internship, we put them through a rigorous exam and a viva voce, and the credits are awarded. So the seriousness is very heavy in this thing. It is not an internship of whether you have done it or not. So out of 30 credits of BVOC, 12 credits are actually for internship, which is a very heavy dose. So that is one sincere effort, substantial amount of it required. So like I said, it has to be, scaling cannot be, just add on. So that's a basic challenge that we are facing. So just wanted to share our experience on that, sir.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Gupta. Perhaps I will suggest that you can prepare a note and send it to AIU, who can circulate to all their other universities. That is a model.
I'll be happy to do that. I'll be happy to share it with Dr. Pankaj Mittal.
Not only for BVOC, even for regular, if you BA history, some credit courses someone wants to take in terms of internship.
We are trying to do that. Our integrated MSc program, we said we must have some skill-based courses so the person can actually be becoming, he should be able to do the biochemistry of in the lab or something like this. He may not be doing his PhD, he may just get his employment at least.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Anyone else? Yeah, Dr. Swati, you want to comment on one of the issues?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that for the internships, what we did is during COVID, it was very difficult to, the industry was also closed. So since internship is a compulsory component in our skill university, what we did is offer e-internships where the projects on which the students were going to work in the industry, the same projects we gave them to work at home, and we assigned every group of 5 students with one industry mentor and one faculty who took them through the 2 months internship during the lockdown to monitor their progress. And when the lockdown was relaxed a little bit, then they were allowed to come into the industry. When the industry started refunctioning, they were also allowed to come into the industry to finish their internship, the last component. Because in our model, there are 8 credits each year for internship. And so that was just one quick point. And the second point I wanted to mention was about teacher training. So we've just launched an institute for teacher training where we have evolved a detailed program to train teachers on the skill-based model. As I mentioned earlier, that many teachers are not aware of even how to teach online, or how to define learning outcomes, what is Bloom's taxonomy, what is the pedagogy for skill training. So it's really important that we train our teachers on effectively administering these skill courses.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Swati has a very valid point. The teacher training, the kind of one data I can say, the ITI systems, 60% of the teachers are unskilled. I mean, not skilled formally. They have developed, so we are trying to bring in a system through a e-skilling method. What you suggest, we can try to skill them up with a short package at the NSTIs to have them a practical part, and otherwise they can skill up and bring it up. And there's no concept of refresher training every year or something. That's all those things we are working on. Improving the ITI ecosystem, which is actually acts as a backbone for the industry. Anyone else? Anyone wanting anything to? Or shall we?
So can AIU look at giving this equivalency? I know AIU does these equivalency kind of areas because that has become a major hurdle for students.
Equivalency for what? For bachelor?
So what happens is, suppose an ITI student tomorrow wants to appear for an engineering entrance or the NATA for architecture, they are not considered equivalent to 12th. So they are not allowed to even appear for an entrance, forget any other quality parameters. Or for example, somebody who does a 12th in the vocational stream, they are not given equivalence to the regular 12th certification. So they're not able to even get admission to many bachelor's programs. While on the other hand, we have so many seats going vacant in engineering or even in other streams like agriculture or electronics. So is that something that AIU could look at, because it's
Before Dr. Pankaj responds, let me add to your voice that actually I have also taking up these issues. See, it is for the hiring organization or the university itself to decide what kind of requirement it wants to put for admissions or for hiring purposes. And universities are delegated the responsibility to AI that, okay, what kind of requirement is there, the AIU decides and the universities accept. So what my suggestion was that wherever a plain 12th is required without any qualification, that 12th with maths, physics, chemistry, or 12th with botany, with this thing, or 12th with economics and maths, wherever a plain 12th is required, for their ITI also should be allowed. That's my ITI should be treated to be equivalent to 12th. I mean 10th plus 2 year of ITI, not any ITI, 10th plus 2 year of ITI. You can examine it. I think it's not a straight answer. I don't expect you to give an answer straight away. There are a lot of issues. Perhaps you can examine this issue. If you want, I can write a letter to you also formally. So for that.
No, but the issue is, sir, that AIU has the mandate of giving equivalence of foreign degrees with the Indian degrees. And plus, apart from that, one more mandate which was given was to give equivalence of PG diploma, which is given by good institution in management to MBA. So these two equivalents we are doing, but the equivalence of ITI with 12th class, so far we have not got the mandate. But if we get the mandate either from your ministry or from the Ministry of Education, we'll be happy to do.
Brother, I will write to you, but what actually mandate to you is given by the universities. AI, because it's the universities' prerogative to decide what will be the entry qualifications for their courses. So if and generally even CBSE, ICSE, there is no official order saying that ICC class 12th is equivalent to class 12th of school system. It is because of the AIU system, they recognize that to be taken as entry point for university system. Based on that, I'm not asking, I won't request for someone wanting to do physics, an ITI student should be allowed. I say wherever the qualification required is 12th without any ifs and but prefixes and suffixes, their ITI may be permitted perhaps. Yeah.
Sir, we have to work with the local state school boards because they are the ones who have to declare that equivalency is there. There is also an option of providing bridge courses. So if the state school board says, well, they can't be declared 12th equivalent because he has not taken maths, then they can offer bridge courses which the students can take. So
no, NIOS has already brought in a provision where for a 12th NIOS, National Institute of Open Schooling, for declaring ITI students to be 12th, they are ready to take the ITI credits, plus they have to take 2 more courses, including 1 language course. That's what they have said. But since the ITIs don't have teachers to teach, they don't have the money to pay teachers to teach these 2 courses, I don't think a single person is availed of this facility. But many courses where this may not be a hindrance, there they will be allowed. At least an enabling system allowing the universities to consider that. Even if that IIU starts a discussion perhaps in the next conference or something, or the university conference they do, that will be very useful. That will be very useful. We
have been talking about ITI. The thing is, in Tamil Nadu, I can give an example. Even students who have passed +2 with the vocational group, they are not allowed to join regular undergraduate degree.
The Delhi
if at all only 10%, 5 to 10% allotment alone is there. That kind of treatment is being given to the +2 student of vocational stream. So these kind of things must be taken to a greater extent.
No,
Okay.
even
All plus two students are eligible to join degree, but there is a restriction. They feel that these are all not to be considered. They are not qualified like that.
no, no,
So, as you said,
even Delhi University doesn't count the vocational stream marks for calculating the seniority of the students after 12th admission. That is the problem. That's why now all of us are there, middle class, upper middle class people. None of us have a child like our child to go for vocational education, even for people. All of us want, if we can be able to BA, MA, whatever subject without any perspective of job in future in mind, but not for a course which is a vocational course. We try to avoid that thing is not like USA, like Swati said, PhD plumbing, why shouldn't be there? PhD in plumbing. So that kind of thing, even the plumbers earn much more. I always see example that a BPO employee may take a Uber vehicle to come. The Uber driver may be paid more than the BPO employee, but the BPO employee considers himself superior in the social hierarchy to the Uber car driver, even though his salary is more. That is the traditional Indian, that is which we will need time perhaps with the NEP, with all students being forced to do vocational also over time. Then this hate for aspiration, this vocational skills may come down. That's my only thing. When middle class also starts doing vocational, that's the time that the problem goes away.
That is
Any other person? I think, or I think we are coming to close. Rather, we have crossed our time, Dr. Mittal.
it's 5:80.
I am supposed to speak for 10 minutes, but I will forsake that because anyway, I have spoken quite a lot in my initial address and the middle also. I think it's an opportunity for you to interact, to ask questions to me. So anyway, that was a very good panel discussion with all the three panelists having spoken three different areas. Dr. Nehru talked on the disruptions, then Dr. Sandhya did a very good, I mean, that was I think popular presentation which everyone wants to share. I also did print screen and copied all the copies of the presentation. It's pasted on my Word file of mine. So that was good on future skills, and Dr. Swati gave a good analysis on the how the issues relating to universities, skill universities, etc. And at the subject of reimagining skilling, I mean, the answers lie in all the three presentations which we saw, both in terms of kinds of skilling we have to do, whom we have to skill, how we have to skill. All these questions have been answered. And I hope the paper which you produced, Dr. Mittal, will be useful for everyone, especially for those from the skilling sectors. Thanks a lot. Thank you, everyone on this.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for sparing so much of time for AIU. Thanks a lot. It was really nice having you. We are grateful and obliged.
That is because of a new.
Thank you, Dr. Pankaj.
Yes, I thought when I saw your letter, I should say no.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mittal. Thank you.
Dr. Savita, you will take over.
Savita, you are mute. Savita ji, you are on mute.
I think there is some technical issue with Dr. Savita. We are not able to hear you, Dr. Savita.
I think Savita is not able to, somehow the communication is not happening. So maybe I will take over for a minute and, thank the panelists for a wonderful job in this session. And I think we had a very detailed deliberations during the day. And starting from the inaugural session to the technical session one, effective communication in, related to NEP national, education policy 2020, and I think the conference extends to tomorrow with a great, panelist, excellent panelist, joining tomorrow along with the last session, the valedictory session. I take this opportunity to thank everybody in the panel and all the vice chancellors, all the dignitaries who have joined this conference, and invite all of you to join tomorrow again in the morning at 10 o'clock when we start. And with the permission of the chair, with the permission of the Secretary General, I would like to thank you all. Unfortunately, last moment, Shivani's device didn't work, so, as alternate arrangement, I took over and extended the vote of thanks. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much, and see you all at 10:30 tomorrow. Please log in 10 minutes before 10:30.
Thank you, Dr.
Please log in 10 minutes before the session, and we expect a very vibrant session tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Dr. Rajni, we will expect you to give a participant's feedback tomorrow in the valedictory session. You're on mute. Please unmute.
Yeah, sorry. I will do that, Dr. Pankaj. I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.